Good day, friends. I'm Kerry Dillinger. This is Bible Class Topics, and you've joined us in our study of the letter of Jude, written by Jude, the Lord's brother. Today we want to look at verses 8 through 16 of this one-chapter letter. If you missed any of our previous studies in the letter of Jude, I'll put a link in the description to that playlist, and I'll also try to remember to put a link to the previous video and the playlist in the end cards. Let's get our Bibles out and be prepared to read Jude verses 8 through 16. We'll begin with the reading of verses 8 through 11 in just a moment. This section of Jude closely parallels 2 Peter 2. In this lesson, we want to talk about God's judgment on the ungodly, which we begin back in verse 5, but today we want to look at the ungodly of Jude's day. We want to look at judgment for slanderous speech, description of the ungodly, and Enoch's prophecy. In our last lesson, we already had looked at the historic judgments against the children of Israel, the angels who fell in Sodom and Gomorrah, and in the following lesson, Lord willing, we'll post that up in a few days, perhaps even this time next week, we'll close out our study of Jude by looking at a call to persevere and the lovely doxology that Jude concludes his letter with. Commodore Perry said, "We have met the enemy and he is ours." In a Pogo comic strip from back in 1970, Pogo said, "We've met the enemy and he is us." Well, here in Jude 8 through 16, Jude tells us we have met the enemy and he is among us. As we just said earlier, Jude closely parallels 2 Peter 2. If you haven't studied that, we do have a video on that chapter of 2 Peter, and once again I'll try to leave a link to that in the description below. Why would Jude take time in his short letter to reiterate the writings of Peter? 2 Peter 2. Well, Paul in Philippians 3:1 agrees things need to be repeated. That's the way we learn. To learn, we often hear something repeatedly. As parents, we know this. And as our spiritual big brother, Jude also knew this. Jude summarizes his description of the apostates, that is, these false teachers, in 3 statements. Namely, they reject divine authority, they resort to deliberate hypocrisy, and they will receive their due penalty. See Wiersbe, page 553. So we'll begin by talking about the fact that these false teachers, these apostates, these Christians that have crept in among the brethren, reject divine authority. Let's read verses 8 through 11. "Yet in like manner these people also, relying on their dreams, defile the flesh, reject authority, and blaspheme the glorious ones. But when the archangel Michael, contending with the devil, was disputing about the body of Moses, he did not presume to pronounce a blasphemous judgment, but said, 'The Lord rebuke you.' But these people blaspheme all that they do not understand, and they're destroyed by all that they, like unreasoning animals, understand instinctively. Woe to them! For they walked in the way of Cain and abandoned themselves for the sake of gain to Balaam's error and perished in Korah's rebellion." Those who exercise authority must first be under authority. And these false teachers have rejected God and set themselves up as their own authority. Let's talk about the cause of the rebellion. And I will put up a few verses for you to pause the video and look at, or you can come back and look at them a little bit later, or you can put them into your notes. But as Peter said in 2 Peter 2, verses 12 and 22, these apostates were brute beasts, and they were living by natural instincts instead of God's law. That was the cause of their rebellion. They were dreamers suffering from delusions of their own personal grandeur. The course of their rebellion was to disobey God as they pleased. They blasphemed God and all he stands for. You can see that in Psalm 73, 9 and 11, and they even despised the angels of God. The consequence of their rebellion can be seen in their ruin. They defile and destroy themselves. And how did they do it? Jude says, through arrogant speech. If Michael, the archangel, refused to speak evil of Satan in their conflict, then how can mortal man rail against God, the angels, or even his fellow man? Rebuke is best left to the Lord in his word. The prophet Zechariah has some to say about that in Zechariah 3, 1 through 5. We know from 1 Peter 5, 8 and 9, Satan is a dangerous enemy, and he needs to be respected for his power. But these evil men criticize everything that they do not understand and allow themselves to be corrupted by the things they do understand. Barclay said this in his commentary, page 189, "What a terrible thing for a person to reach a stage where they are deaf to God and blind to goodness, and that is the very stage which these false teachers whom Jude attacked had reached." These false teachers whom Jude attacks, they had reached this very stage. The cause of their rebellion, the course of their rebellion, the consequences of their rebellion, their condemnation. Their condemnation is likened to three men from the Old Testament who suffered greatly for their sin of rebellion. Number one, the way of Cain. The way of Cain is religion without faith. Cain rejected God's salvation. This is the kind of religion that says, I'll do it my way, and the Lord can like it, or the Lord can lump it. Well, there's nothing to worry about. He will. The Lord will lump it. By following his instinct, Cain was led to disobey God and hate and murder his brother Abel. If you have time, pause the video and take a look at Romans 10, 1 through 4, and Philippians 3, 3 through 12. The condemnation of these false teachers, these apostates, is likened to the way of Balaam. And the way of Balaam is religion for personal gain. See 2 Peter 2, 15 and 16. Balaam sought to use his gift of prophecy for all the wrong reasons. He rejected God's command of separation and hoped to make money off of the plight of the children of Israel. Another man who suffered greatly for his sin of rebellion is Korah. The way of Korah is a religion of usurped authority. See his story in Numbers 16. Korah and his followers spoke against Moses, and in doing so, they spoke against God. We must be careful how we speak against our spiritual and governmental leaders. See Titus 3, 1 and 2. Korah rejected God's authority of service. Let's read three more verses. Let's read 12, 13, and then let's drop down to 16. Starting in verse 12. These are hidden reefs at your love feast, as they feast with you without fear, shepherds feeding themselves, waterless clouds swept along by winds, fruitless trees in late autumn, twice dead, uprooted, wild waves of the sea, casting up the foam of their own shame, wandering stars for whom the gloom of utter darkness has been reserved forever. Now drop down to verse 16. These are grumblers, malcontents, following their own sinful desires. They are loud-mouthed boasters, showing favoritism to gain advantage. I'm reading from the ESV today. They resort to deliberate hypocrisy. The Old King James says they're filthy spots. The newer versions say they're hidden rocks or hidden reefs. As sailors must watch for reefs and rocks beneath the surface, Christians must watch for false teachers waiting just below the surface to rip the hull out of a faithful congregation. Because of such apostates, the love feast were discontinued in the church by the 4th century. From Paul's account, we can see that the practice was already being abused even in the middle of the 1st century. See 1 Corinthians 11, verses 17 through 34. These men were hidden rocks. They were selfish shepherds, as we read in verse 12, part B. It's hard to tell if these are renegade elders or those usurping the rightful eldership authority. But either way, they were interested in feeding themselves and not the flock. Ezekiel 34:2, Isaiah 56:11. Moving on in verse 12, these men were empty clouds. See Proverbs 25:14. Empty clouds are empty promises concerning something that is much needed, whether it's physical rain or spiritual rain. These men, according to the next part of verse 12, were dead trees. You know, autumn is the time when trees should be their most fruitful. But these apostates were twice dead because Jude said they had no fruit, and literally they had been pulled up by their roots, incapable of producing fruit and thus incapable of spreading true and good seed. Moving into verse 13, Jude says they're raging waves. As raging waves produce mass destruction, so will false teachers. See Isaiah 57:20 and 2 Peter 2:18. Continuing in verse 13, these men are wandering stars. They're not fixed beacons of light like Jesus Christ, but meteor-like falling stars that suddenly appear, bring forth a great flash of light, and then disappear, never to be heard from or seen again. Then as we drop down to verse 16, we see that they are murmurers and complainers. They impress their followers as helpers, but they are out for themselves, and of course they're resorting to what we said earlier, deliberate hypocrisy. If we read the Phillips translation of 2 Peter 2:14, we'll see that Phillips, in his translation, hit the nail on the head. Their technique of getting what they want is, through long practice, highly developed. These are the ones who will complain about their station in life, murmur against the providence of God, and question God's faithful goodness because of the ills of humanity. See Woods, page 401. These murmurers and complainers are yes men, and they're full of hot air. They use false flattery and compliments to take advantage of the weak. Now we'll continue and finish our study by looking for a moment or two at verses 14 and 15. These false teachers will receive their due penalty. It was also about these that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment on all, and to convict all of the ungodly of all their deeds of ungodliness that they have committed in such an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things that ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Did you hear the word ungodly used over and over and over again in this 2-verse reading? Many believe that the idea of a final judgment day is a New Testament concept. However, from this passage we see that Enoch, who lived only 7 generations after Adam, Genesis 5:3-32, Enoch was aware of the judgment day. The study of Enoch and the origins of the quote Jude allegedly takes from him are beyond the scope of this lesson. For more in the Bible on Enoch, I suggest you see Genesis 5:21 through 24 and Hebrews 11:5. Suffice it to say, for our purposes here, as we study this letter of Jude, Enoch was a righteous man, and he was loved by God. And he says the due penalty will come to the ungodly, namely a personal judgment. Personal judgment was coming, yet the Lord would bring witnesses, including his angels and the saints who have gone before. This judgment will be for all people in all time. It will be universal. All will be judged, and none will escape. As Peter said in 2 Peter 3, verse 7, it will be the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. And of course, we hardly ever say the word perdition in the year 2023 or 2024, as I'm now recording this in January of 2024. We don't say perdition. What is Peter talking about? He's talking about the day of judgment and the day of destruction for all the ungodly men, and it is coming. Regardless of what some commentators may say about the judgment day, it will be a just judgment. However, we have to realize there will be a judge but no jury. There will be a prosecution but no defense, and a sentence but no appeal. How then will this judgment serve justice? Well, simply put, the righteous Son of God is the judge, and God's word is the standard of judgment. The evidence against these false teachers will be the record of their evil deeds. Let's conclude our study today by asking a question from Psalm 94, giving an answer from Psalm 50, and make a statement concerning our hope from 2 Peter 3:13. Our question is, O Lord, how long shall the wicked exult? They pour out their arrogant words, and all the evildoers boast. The answer to that question, our God comes. He does not keep silence. Before him he is a devouring fire, and around him is a mighty tempest. Well, what is our hope? What is the Christian's hope? 2 Peter 3:13. But according to his promise, we're waiting. We're waiting for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness will dwell forever. We'll stop right there. Thank you for studying with me today. I hope these notes concerning the letter of Jude are helpful to you in your personal Bible study. I hope you can join me again in the next few days for another lesson. Thank you for your support of the channel. Please give this video a like or even a dislike. Subscribe to the channel. Ring the notification bell. Leave a comment. All these things will greatly support the channel, and we will greatly appreciate it. Till we meet again, may God bless.